I thought my grandmother had forgotten about me. At the will reading, my cousins walked away with millions from her botanical patents, while I got a wooden box containing a single seed and a plane ticket to some island I'd never heard of. I felt like the family disappointment, until a local guide on that remote island said 7 words that changed everything. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, what's your favorite kind of plant? Drop it in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now, let me take you back to the day I thought I'd lost everything. The law office of Campbell and Associates smelled like old leather and disappointment. I sat in an uncomfortable chair, fidgeting with the sleeves of my only good blazer, watching my cousins Theodore and Abigail whisper confidently to each other across the mahogany conference table. They looked like they belonged here. Expensive suits, perfect hair, the kind of quiet arrogance that comes from never having to check your bank balance before buying coffee. I, on the other hand, felt like an imposter. My blazer was 3 years old and bought on clearance. My shoes had a scuff I'd tried to cover with a Sharpie. I worked at the Seattle Aquarium, making barely enough to cover my student loans and rent on a studio apartment that was generous to call cozy. "Thank you all for coming," said Mr. Campbell, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he opened a thick folder. "We're here for the reading of Dr. Louisa Griffin's last will and testament." My grandmother. Even her name sounded important when he said it like that. Dr. Louisa Griffin, renowned botanist, holder of 17 patents for plant-based medicines, author of 3 groundbreaking books on rare flora. She'd spent her life traveling to remote corners of the world, discovering plants that could cure diseases, developing treatments that had helped millions of people. And I'd barely known her. Growing up, Grandma Louisa was more legend than family member. She'd appear at Christmas with exotic gifts and stories about rainforests and mountain expeditions, then disappear again for months at a time. My cousin's parents, her other children, had followed her into the business world, turning her discoveries into profitable pharmaceutical companies. My mother had been the black sheep, choosing to become a high school biology teacher instead of chasing patents and profits. "To my grandson, Theodore, I leave my shares in Griffin Pharmaceuticals, valued at approximately $12 million, along with the patents for compounds WM47 through WM63. Theodore smiled smugly and squeezed his wife's hand. $12 million. I tried to imagine what that kind of money would feel like, what problems it would solve, what doors it would open. "To my granddaughter, Abigail, I leave my shares in Griffin Biotech, valued at approximately $15 million, along with the patents for compounds WM64 through WM81. Abigail actually clapped her hands together softly, like she was at a golf tournament. 15 million. Between the two of them, they'd just inherited enough money to buy small countries. I waited for my name, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Maybe there was something left. Maybe Grandma Louisa had remembered the granddaughter who'd actually studied biology, who'd chosen science over business, who'd spent her career trying to protect marine life instead of exploit it. "And finally," he said, looking directly at me, "to my granddaughter, Joy, I leave the contents of Safety Deposit Box 247 at First National Bank." That was it. No dollar amount, no description, just a safety deposit box? Theodore and Abigail exchanged glances that managed to be both sympathetic and condescending. "I'm sure there's something meaningful in there," Abigail said in the tone people use when they're trying to be kind about your obvious disappointment. "Grandmother always was eccentric," Theodore added. "I'm sure whatever she left you has sentimental value." Sentimental value. The phrase people use when something is worthless but they don't want to say it out loud. An hour later, I was sitting in the bank vault, staring at the contents of Safety Deposit Box 247. It contained exactly 2 items: a small wooden box about the size of a jewelry case, and an envelope with my name written in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. I opened the envelope first. Inside was a plane ticket: Seattle to Boston to Lisbon to Ponta Delgada, São Miguel Island, Azores. The departure date was 3 days away. There was also a handwritten note on expensive stationery. My dearest Joy, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably feeling confused and perhaps a bit hurt. Trust me, my darling girl. Take the journey. Everything will make sense when you arrive. Look for Maria Santos. She'll be waiting for you. All my love, Grandma Luisa. I opened the wooden box next. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a single seed. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. About the size of a walnut, with a hard, dark shell that seemed to shimmer with an almost metallic sheen. Strange ridges and patterns covered its surface, like nature's own intricate carving. I turned it over in my hands, my marine biology training kicking in. I'd studied seeds in my undergraduate botany courses, but this one was completely unfamiliar. The patterns were too complex, too deliberate. It looked ancient, like something that might have grown in prehistoric forests. A plane ticket to an island I'd never heard of, and a mysterious seed. While my cousins had inherited enough money to retire in luxury, I'd inherited, what? A riddle? A wild goose chase? I sat in that sterile bank vault for 20 minutes, turning the seed over and over in my hands, reading and rereading my grandmother's note. The rational part of my brain said this was crazy. I couldn't afford to take time off work, couldn't afford the additional travel expenses once I got to Portugal, couldn't afford to chase after some mysterious family errand that might mean nothing. But another part of me, the part that had always felt like I didn't quite fit in my own family, the part that had chosen to study the ocean instead of chasing money, whispered that maybe this was exactly what I needed to do. My grandmother had been many things, but she'd never been frivolous. If she'd left me a plane ticket and a seed, there had to be a reason. I called in sick to work the next day and spent hours researching the Azores. The islands were a Portuguese archipelago in the middle of the Atlantic, known for volcanic landscapes, hot springs, and unique ecosystems. São Miguel was the largest island, with a population of about 140,000 people. It was beautiful, remote, and expensive to visit. I also tried researching the seed, photographing it from every angle and running the images through botanical databases. Nothing. It's like the seed didn't exist in any scientific literature. By the 3rd day, I'd made my decision. I packed a single suitcase with clothes suitable for hiking and unpredictable weather, withdrew most of my savings account for expenses, and headed to the airport. The flight was long, nearly 20 hours with layovers, and gave me plenty of time to second-guess my decision. What if this was some kind of elaborate joke? What if my grandmother had been suffering from dementia at the end and none of this made sense? What if I was about to spend my life savings on a meaningless trip to an island where no one was waiting for me? But every time I started to panic, I'd take out the wooden box and look at the seed. There was something about it that felt important, significant. It seemed to pulse with potential energy, like it was just waiting for the right conditions to reveal its secrets. The plane descended through clouds towards São Miguel Island, and I got my first glimpse of the landscape below. It was breathtaking. Green hills dotted with small towns, dramatic coastlines where volcanic cliffs met the Atlantic, and in the center of the island, what looked like massive crater lakes reflecting the sky like mirrors. Ponta Delgada Airport was small and efficient. I collected my luggage and walked through customs, looking around nervously for someone who might be Maria Santos. My grandmother's note had said she'd be waiting, but what if she wasn't? What if I was stranded on an island where I didn't speak the language, with no plan and dwindling money? Joy Griffin? I turned to see a woman approaching me with a warm smile. She was probably in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of deep tan that comes from spending most of her life outdoors. She wore hiking boots, cargo pants, and a fleece jacket that had seen better days. "I'm Maria Santos," she said, extending her hand. "Your grandmother told me to watch for a young woman who looked like she was questioning every decision that had brought her here." I laughed despite my nervousness. "That's definitely me. You knew my grandmother?" "Louisa and I were old friends, very old friends. She spoke of you often." "She did?" "Oh, yes. She was very proud of your work with marine conservation. She said you were the only one in the family who understood that some things are more valuable than money." We walked out of the airport into the warm Atlantic air. The island smelled like salt and flowers, with an underlying hint of volcanic sulfur that reminded me this was a geologically active place. "Where are we going?" I asked as Maria led me to a well-worn Land Rover. "To see what your grandmother left for you," Maria said mysteriously. "But first we need to drive to the other side of the island. It's about an hour through the mountains." As we drove, Maria told me about the island's history, its unique ecosystem, its volcanic origins. She was clearly a naturalist, pointing out endemic plants and explaining how the island's isolation had led to the evolution of species found nowhere else on Earth. "Your grandmother first came here 30 years ago. She was researching endemic flora for pharmaceutical applications. But she fell in love with the island, with its wildness, with its secrets." "Secrets?" Maria smiled. "Every island has secrets, Joy, especially islands that have been isolated for millions of years. Evolution does interesting things when left alone." We drove through small villages with whitewashed houses and red tile roofs, past fields where cows grazed on impossibly green grass, through forests of trees I didn't recognize. The landscape was like nothing I'd ever seen, simultaneously familiar and alien, European and tropical, ancient and timeless. "Can I ask you something? What exactly did my grandmother do here? I mean, I know she was a botanist, but—" "She was protecting something," Maria said simply. "Something very rare, very valuable, and very fragile. Something that certain people would destroy if they knew it existed." "What kind of something?" "You'll see." We drove for another 20 minutes before Maria turned off the main road onto what was barely more than a dirt track. "What your grandmother left for you isn't on San Miguel itself," Maria said as she saw my worried face. "It's not?" She smiled mysteriously. "We'll take my boat to a smaller island, one that doesn't appear on most tourist maps." The marina was bustling with fishing boats and tourist vessels. Maria led me to a sturdy-looking motorboat that had clearly seen years of use, but was well-maintained. "This is how your grandmother and I traveled back and forth," Maria said, loading my suitcase into the boat. She insisted on keeping the location completely secret. No helicopter flights, no chartered yachts that might attract attention, just a simple boat trip that looks like we're going fishing. As we pulled away from the harbor, I watched San Miguel shrink behind us. The island's green hills and white buildings grew smaller until they were just a line on the horizon. We were heading northwest into open Atlantic waters that stretched endlessly in every direction. "How far is it?" I asked, gripping the side of the boat as we bounced over the waves. "About 40 minutes, Maria called over the engine noise. "The island is officially called Ilha de Esperanza, Hope Islet. It's been uninhabited for over a century." The boat ride gave me time to think about how isolated we were becoming. This wasn't just a trip to a remote location, this was a journey to a place that existed outside the normal world, a secret that had been hidden in plain sight for 30 years. Hope Islet rose from the ocean like a green jewel, its cliffs dramatic and forbidding, its interior hidden by dense forest. There was no beach, no obvious landing spot, no sign that humans had ever set foot there. How do we get ashore? I asked. Very carefully, Maria said, steering toward what looked like a narrow gap in the cliffs. Your grandmother had a small dock built in a hidden cove. It's the only way onto the island. The cove, when we reached it, was like something from a fairy tale. High walls of volcanic rock created a natural harbor, completely invisible from the open ocean. A simple wooden dock extended into the crystal clear water, and a narrow path wound up through the rocks toward the forest above. Welcome to your island, Joy, Maria said as she tied off the boat. Welcome to the last grove. From here, we walk, Maria said, shouldering her backpack. The path beyond the stone wall was narrow and winding, leading through vegetation that grew thicker and more exotic with every step. The air itself felt different here, more humid, more alive, charged with an energy I couldn't identify. Birds called from the canopy above us, but they didn't sound like any birds I knew. The very light seemed greener, filtered through weaves that were too large, too glossy, too perfect. Maria, I said, stopping on the path, what is this place? This, she said, turning to face me with an expression that was part excitement, part reverence. This is what your grandmother discovered 30 years ago. This is what she spent her fortune protecting. This is why she brought you here. We walked for another 10 minutes before the path opened into a clearing, and I saw something that made me forget how to breathe. It was a forest, but unlike any forest I'd ever seen or studied. The trees were massive, easily 100 feet tall, with trunks that seemed to glow with an inner light. Their bark was smooth and silver, almost metallic, and their leaves were the deep green of emeralds. The canopy above us filtered the sunlight into patterns that danced and shifted like living things. But it wasn't just the beauty that took my breath away. It was the sense of age, of ancientness, of something that had existed long before humans walked the earth. These trees felt prehistoric, primordial, like survivors from a world that had vanished millions of years ago. My God, I whispered. What are they? Dracena asorensis, Maria said softly. Dragon trees. But not like any dragon trees that exist anywhere else in the world. These are the original species, the ancestors of all other dragon trees. They've been growing here for over 10 million years. I walked deeper into the grove, my hands trailing along the smooth bark of the nearest tree. It was warm to the touch, almost alive in a way that went beyond normal plant life. The air around the trees hummed with energy, and I could swear I felt something like a pulse beneath my fingertips. They're incredible, I said. But why are they secret? Why isn't this a protected park, a UNESCO site? Maria's expression darkened. Because these trees produce something that pharmaceutical companies would kill for, literally. She led me to the base of the largest tree, where the massive trunk flared out into buttress roots that created natural alcoves. In one of these alcoves, I could see where someone had carefully collected a small amount of resin, a golden, amber-like substance that seemed to glow with its own light. The resin from these trees, Maria explained, contains compounds that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Your grandmother spent 20 years studying them. They have properties that could revolutionize medicine, cancer treatment, neurological disorders, aging itself. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's why she kept this place secret. Exactly. If the pharmaceutical industry knew about this grove, they'd strip mine it within a year. They'd cut down trees that have been growing for millennia, destroy an ecosystem that can never be replaced, all for profit. I pulled the wooden box from my backpack and opened it, showing Maria the seed my grandmother had left me. Is this a seed from these trees? Maria confirmed. But not just any seed. That's a seed from the mother tree, the oldest and largest tree in the grove. Seeds from the mother tree are incredibly rare. The tree only produces them once every 7 years, and only a few at a time. I looked at the seed with new understanding. This wasn't just a mysterious inheritance. It was a piece of something irreplaceable, something that connected me to millions of years of evolution. But why did she leave it to me? Why not to Theodore or Abigail? They have the business experience, the connections, the money to protect something like this. Maria smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked truly happy. Because they would have sold it. They would have seen dollar signs instead of dragon trees. They would have turned this into a commodity instead of protecting it as a treasure. She gestured for me to follow her deeper into the grove, where the trees grew even larger and more magnificent. In the center of the forest stood a tree that dwarfed all the others, easily 150 feet tall, with a trunk so massive that it would take 20 people holding hands to encircle it. "The mother tree," Maria said reverently. "She's over 1,000 years old, maybe older. Your grandmother used to sit here for hours, just listening to the forest, planning how to protect it." I approached the ancient tree and placed my hand on its bark. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a sense of connection, of belonging, of coming home to a place I'd never been but had always known existed. "Maria," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "who owns this land? Who's been protecting it?" Maria turned to face me, and her smile was radiant. "She left the entire island to you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered backward, certain I'd misheard. "What did you say?" "Your grandmother didn't just discover this grove, Joy. She bought it. She bought the entire island, piece by piece, over 30 years. She used every penny she made from her patents, every dollar from her pharmaceutical companies to purchase land and create a private nature preserve." I felt dizzy, like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "The entire island?" "All of it. The forests, the coastline, the volcanic lakes, everything. She's been the legal owner for 15 years, but she kept it secret, protected the ecosystem from development and exploitation." I sank down onto one of the mother tree's massive roots, my mind reeling. "But that's impossible. An entire island would be worth—" "Hundreds of millions of dollars," Maria finished. "Your grandmother was far wealthier than anyone in your family realized. The patents she held weren't just valuable, they were revolutionary. She licensed them to pharmaceutical companies for enormous sums, then used that money to buy and protect places like this all over the world." I thought about the will reading, about Theodore and Abigail's smug satisfaction with their inheritances. 12 and 15 million seemed like unimaginable wealth, but they were nothing compared to what I was hearing. Why didn't she tell anyone? Why keep it secret? Because the moment word got out that she owned an island with trees like these, every pharmaceutical company in the world would have come after her. They would have offered billions, threatened lawsuits, used every tool at their disposal to get access to this grove. I sank down beside me on the root, her expression serious. "Your grandmother spent the last 30 years of her life playing a very dangerous game, Joy. She was protecting something that could change the world, but only if it remained protected. The compounds in these trees could cure diseases, extend human life, revolutionize medicine, but only if the trees survive to produce them sustainably." I looked around the grove with new eyes. Every tree represented millions of years of evolution, irreplaceable genetic information, potential cures for diseases that hadn't even been discovered yet. And my grandmother had trusted me, the family disappointment who worked at an aquarium, to protect it all. "I don't understand. Why me? I'm nobody. I don't have business experience. I don't have connections in the pharmaceutical industry. I don't even have money." "That's exactly why she chose you, Joy. Because you understand that some things are more valuable than money. Because you've dedicated your life to protecting marine ecosystems instead of exploiting them. Because you see the ocean as something to preserve, not something to profit from." She pulled a thick envelope from her backpack and handed it to me. "Your grandmother left this for you to read when you were ready." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded several pages of my grandmother's handwriting. "My dearest Joy, if you're reading this, then you've found the grove and Maria has told you the truth about your inheritance. I imagine you're feeling overwhelmed, perhaps frightened, certainly confused about why I've placed such an enormous responsibility on your shoulders. Let me tell you a story about a young woman who graduated with a degree in botany 50 years ago, full of dreams about discovering new species and helping humanity. That young woman, me, spent the first 20 years of her career focused on profit, on patents, on turning nature's secrets into commercial success. I was good at it. Perhaps too good. I made millions from plants that indigenous peoples had known about for centuries, and I told myself I was helping humanity while I lined my own pockets. It wasn't until I came to this island 30 years ago that I understood what I'd been doing wrong. I found this grove by accident, following rumors of unusual flora in the island's interior. When I saw these trees, when I understood what they represented, I realized that some discoveries are too important to commercialize. These dragon trees are living libraries, Joy. Their genetic code contains information that could help humanity in ways we can't even imagine yet. But that information is only valuable if the trees survive to share it. If we cut them down for immediate profit, we lose millions of years of evolutionary wisdom forever. I've spent 3 decades protecting this place, buying land piece by piece, creating a legal framework that will preserve it long after I'm gone. But legal frameworks aren't enough. This place needs a guardian, someone who understands that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the preservation of irreplaceable natural treasures. I chose you because you've already proven you understand this principle. You chose to study marine biology not because it would make you rich, but because you wanted to protect something beautiful and important. You work at an aquarium not because it pays well, but because you believe in conservation, in education, in helping people understand why we need to protect our natural world. Your cousins are good people, but they see nature as a resource to be managed and monetized. You see it as a treasure to be protected and preserved. That's why this island needs you. I know this seems overwhelming. I know you're probably wondering how you could possibly manage something so vast and important, but you won't be alone. Maria has been my partner in protecting this place for 20 years. The local communities have been its guardians for generations. There are scientists and conservationists around the world who will support your work. And you have resources now, my darling girl. The island generates income from carefully managed research partnerships, from the sale of seeds and saplings to botanical gardens worldwide. You'll never want for money again, but more importantly, you'll never lack for purpose. The seed I left you isn't just a symbol, it's a responsibility. Plant it somewhere safe, tend it carefully, and watch it grow into something magnificent. That's what I'm asking you to do with this entire island. I love you, Joy. I've always been proud of you, even when I couldn't find the words to say so. You have the heart of a true conservationist and the soul of a scientist. This island couldn't be in better hands. All my love and faith in you, Grandma Louisa. P.S. There's a cottage near the grove that I've been using as a research station. It's yours now, if you want it. I think you'll find it has everything you need to begin your new life as the guardian of the last grove. I read the letter 3 times before the words fully sank in. My grandmother hadn't just left me an island, she'd left me a mission, a purpose, a chance to dedicate my life to something truly meaningful. There's more, Maria said gently, pulling out another folder. Legal documents, financial statements, research notes. Your grandmother was very thorough. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The first document was a deed officially transferring ownership of Ilio da Esperanza to Joey Louisa Griffin, me. The second was a bank statement showing accounts with balances that made my head spin. Hundreds of millions of dollars, all designated for the preservation and protection of the island's ecosystems. "This is real," I whispered. "This is all real." "Very real," Maria confirmed, "and very secret. As far as the outside world knows, the island is still owned by a series of shell companies and conservation trusts. Your grandmother was paranoid about keeping her ownership hidden." I stood up and walked deeper into the grove, trying to process everything I had learned. An hour ago, I'd been a struggling aquarium worker who thought her family had forgotten about her. Now, I was the secret owner of an entire island, the guardian of trees that could change the world, the inheritor of a conservation mission that spanned decades. "What happens now?" I asked. "That's up to you," Maria said. "You could sell everything tomorrow and become one of the richest people in the world. You could license the tree's genetic material to pharmaceutical companies and make billions. You could develop the island for tourism and create a luxury resort empire. Or you could do what your grandmother did: protect it, study it, share its secrets carefully and sustainably. Use your resources to expand conservation efforts to other endangered ecosystems around the world." I thought about my life back in Seattle, my tiny apartment, my student loans, my job cleaning fish tanks and giving tours to school children. It had been a good life, meaningful in its own small way, but it had also been limited, constrained by financial reality and lack of opportunity. Now I had unlimited opportunity and unlimited responsibility. "The cottage my grandmother mentioned, can I see it?" Maria's face lit up. "Of course, it's just a short walk from here." She led me along a path that wound through the grove, past trees that seemed to whisper secrets in languages I didn't understand. The cottage, when we reached it, was perfect. A small stone building that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape, with solar panels on the roof and large windows that looked out over the forest. Inside, it was a scientist's dream. The main room was part library, part laboratory, with shelves full of research journals and equipment for studying plant genetics. There was a comfortable bedroom, a modern kitchen, and a study lined with my grandmother's notebooks and research. She spent months here every year, studying the trees, documenting their properties, planning conservation strategies. All of her research is here, waiting for you. I picked up one of the notebooks and opened it to a random page. My grandmother's handwriting filled the margins around detailed botanical drawings, notes about soil composition and rainfall patterns, theories about the tree's evolutionary history. She really did this. I said, more to myself than Maria. She really spent 30 years protecting this place. "And now it's your turn," Maria said softly. I walked to the window and looked out at the grove, at the ancient trees that had survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions, that had evolved in isolation for millions of years, that held secrets that could benefit all of humanity if properly protected and studied. My phone buzzed with a text message, probably my supervisor at the aquarium, wondering where I was, when I'd be back to work. The thought of returning to my old life, of pretending this had never happened, seemed impossible now. "Maria," I said, turning away from the window, "I need to ask you something important. Anything. Will you help me? Will you teach me what I need to know to do this right?" Her smile was radiant. "Joy, your grandmother and I always hoped that someday someone would come along who could take this work to the next level, who could expand it beyond just this island." "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother owned more than just this island. She had conservation projects on 6 continents, protected forests in the Amazon, marine sanctuaries in the Pacific, research stations in places most people have never heard of. She built a global network of protected ecosystems, all funded by her pharmaceutical patents, all managed through shell companies and conservation trusts." I felt dizzy again. How much? Billions of dollars, Joy. Hundreds of thousands of acres of protected land, research partnerships with universities around the world. Your grandmother wasn't just a botanist, she was a conservationist, and she did it all in secret. I sank into one of the cottage's comfortable chairs, overwhelmed by the scope of what I'd inherited. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm smart enough, strong enough, experienced enough. Your grandmother felt the same way when she started, Maria said, sitting across from me. But she learned and she grew into the role, and you have something she didn't have when she began. What's that? You have her 30 years of work to build on. You have established systems, trusted partners, proven strategies. You don't have to start from scratch, you just have to continue what she began. I looked around the cottage, at the evidence of my grandmother's life's work, at the research that could change the world if properly continued. Outside the window, the grove stood silent and ancient, waiting for its new guardian to make a choice. There's something else, Maria said, pulling out one final envelope. Your grandmother recorded a video message for you. She wanted you to hear it after you'd seen the grove, after you understood what you'd inherited. She handed me a tablet and pressed play. My grandmother's face appeared on the screen, older than I remembered, but with eyes that sparkled with intelligence and determination. Hello, my darling Joy. If you're watching this, then you've found the growth and learned the truth about your inheritance. I imagine you're feeling overwhelmed, perhaps frightened by the responsibility I've placed on your shoulders. I want you to know that I didn't choose you lightly. I've been watching you your entire life, proud of every choice you've made, every sacrifice you've accepted in service of something larger than yourself. When you chose marine biology over a more lucrative career, when you took a job at an aquarium instead of a corporate laboratory, when you dedicated your life to education and conservation instead of profit, those choices told me everything I needed to know about your character. You have the heart of a true conservationist, Joy. You understand that some things are more valuable than money, that some treasures are worth protecting even when no one else understands their value. That's exactly what this island needs, someone who will see it not as a resource to be exploited, but as a treasure to be preserved. I know this seems impossible. I know you're probably wondering how you could possibly manage something so vast and important. But remember, my darling girl, every great conservation effort started with one person who cared enough to try. John Muir protecting Yosemite, Rachel Carson exposing the dangers of pesticides, Jane Goodall studying chimpanzees. They all started as individuals who believed that nature was worth fighting for. You're not alone in this work. You have Maria, who has been my partner and friend for 20 years. You have resources that will allow you to hire the best scientists, the most dedicated conservationists, the most effective legal advocates. You have a network of protected areas around the world that are already making a difference. But most importantly, you have something that can't be bought or taught. You have the passion to do this work not because you have to, but because you want to. Because you understand that protecting these trees, preserving these ecosystems, sharing these discoveries responsibly, that's not just a job, it's a calling. I love you, Joy. I believe in you. And I know that this island, these trees, this work, they couldn't be in better hands. Welcome to your new life, my darling girl. Make it extraordinary. The video ended and I sat in silence for several minutes, tears streaming down my face. My grandmother had seen something in me that I'd never seen in myself, the potential to be more than just a struggling scientist, to be a guardian of something irreplaceable. What do you think? Maria asked gently. I stood up and walked back to the window, looking out at the grove that was now mine to protect. The mother tree stood in the center of the forest like an ancient sentinel, its silver bark gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. Birds I couldn't identify called from the canopy, and the air itself seemed to pulse with life and possibility. I think, I said slowly, Then I need to call my supervisor and quit my job." Maria laughed. "Is that a yes?" I turned to face her, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose, of belonging, of being exactly where I was meant to be. "That's a yes," I said firmly. "I'm going to do this. I'm going to protect this place, continue my grandmother's work, and try to be worthy of the trust she placed in me." "Then welcome home, Joy. Welcome to the rest of your life." 6 months later, I was standing in the same grove, but everything had changed. I'd moved permanently to the island, transforming the cottage into my home and research base. I'd hired a team of botanists and conservationists to help study and protect the dragon trees. I'd established partnerships with universities around the world to research the trees' medicinal properties without exploiting them. Most importantly, I'd planted the seed my grandmother had left me. It was growing in a protected nursery, carefully tended and monitored, destined to become part of the next generation of dragon trees that would carry this ancient species into the future. My cousins had been shocked when they learned the truth about my inheritance. Theodore had actually called to offer his expertise in managing my windfall, clearly assuming I was in over my head. I'd politely declined, explaining that I was quite happy with my new role as a conservationist. "But Joy, you could sell just a small portion of the island and be set for life. You could have anything you want." "I already have everything I want. I have meaningful work, unlimited resources to do good in the world, and the chance to protect something irreplaceable. What more could anyone ask for?" He hung up, clearly unable to understand how anyone could choose trees over treasure, conservation over cash. But I understood now what my grandmother had known all along, that the real treasure wasn't the money or the land or even the trees themselves. The real treasure was the opportunity to dedicate your life to something larger than yourself, to be part of a story that would continue long after you were gone. As I stood in the grove that evening, watching the sunset filter through the ancient canopy, I felt my grandmother's presence in the whisper of wind through the leaves, in the warm pulse of life beneath my feet, in the sense of continuity that connected past and future through the simple act of caring for something beautiful and irreplaceable. I'd thought I was the family disappointment, the one who got the consolation prize while my cousins inherited the real wealth. But I'd been wrong about everything. My grandmother hadn't forgotten about me. She'd been preparing me my entire life for this moment, this choice, this chance to become the guardian of something that could change the world. The seed she'd left me was growing into a tree, and I was growing into the person she'd always believed I could become. An absolutely incredible story about hidden legacies, true wealth, and the courage to choose purpose over profit. What would you do if you were in Joy's position? Share it in the comments below. If this story of conservation, family secrets, and finding your true calling inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing stories about discovering where you truly belong. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.